Well, today, more Australians than ever are being diagnosed and prescribed medication for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, otherwise known more commonly as ADHD. Now, it affects 1 in 20 Australian kids and up to 3% of adults. And it's estimated that 1.5 million Australians were prescribed medication for ADHD in the 2020 to 2021 financial year.
But despite its prevalence, many of us understand surprisingly little about the disorder. And to help us get a better picture of ADHD, we're joined now by Charlotte Moore, who lives with ADHD, and clinical psychologist with the University of Sydney, Professor Adam Guastella. Good morning to you, both of you. Thanks for coming in. Charlotte, I'll start with you. This all came to a head when you got a new job as a speech pathologist. Tell us about what happened.
Yeah, that's right. So I had just graduated from my Masters of Speech Pathology and gone into what I thought was my dream job, working at a hospital. And after about 3 or 4 months there, realised that I just wasn't coping. I would sit there and, try to write my notes and get all my clinical kind of responsibilities done. But in the background, I could only hear the machines going bing in the background, nurses walking past, other, team members having conversations, and I was just drawn to that. And so for me, it gradually became more and more of a problem until I got to the point where my wonderful supervisors and my boss started to say, okay, there's a problem here. We can tell that you're putting in as much effort as you possibly can, but we're not seeing the results and we're not seeing the progress on our end. And for me, that was heartbreaking. And I really felt like I was failing. But once I started to have a think about it, I started to consider were there other factors that were stopping me from progressing, and the kind of attention deficit side of it really started to become apparent for me. I spoke to a psychiatrist and we kind of realised that actually all of those things that I was having trouble with really fed into the diagnosis of ADHD, particularly the attention deficit side. And I was able to understand that actually it wasn't that I wasn't trying hard, but it was my brain just didn't really work in that environment.
Adam, a lot of people would recognise that attention deficit in the name in itself. I mean, that kind of gives away what ADHD is all about. But what other symptoms are there? For anyone who may be like Charlotte going, well, I can't seem to focus. But what else is there?
Well, so there are two main components. The first is the inattention side of it, and inattention has to be across multiple contexts, but it can affect people in so many different ways. And so it could be about not being able to remember where you've put things on a daily basis, being able to follow instructions and tasks, being able to concentrate on tasks, particularly tasks that make you feel a bit anxious or there's a level of expectation for long periods of time, and being able to focus for 20 minutes, half an hour. I often speak to people who say they struggle to read papers, to read books. It may be also about being unable to focus at home and during quiet time and being able to really relax and enjoy what's in front of you. So it really affects many people in different ways. And the second part is the hyperactivity, so that inability to sit still or to fidget constantly or to move around. So if you're noticing a pattern in multiple contexts about inattention hyperactivity, it's really, really important to see a doctor and get some advice.
So Adam, there are some new guidelines coming out looking at the diagnosis and the treatment of ADHD. Over the years, what's been lacking in the diagnosis and treatment?
I'm so excited about the guidelines. They're going to be so great. And ADPA have done a really great job in developing these guidelines. What we really need is an evidence-based, standard way of conducting high-quality assessments to give people what they need. And historically, it's really depended on whether you've gone to a doctor or a psychologist who has knowledge about ADHD. That's determined the type of response you've got, and you could get so many different responses. So these guidelines, we should be celebrating them. They're going to standardise the way that people do assessments to make sure they get the best quality assessments, and that's going to be something that's going to be recognised across the country. And that's why when the Health Minister releases those guidelines, we should be celebrating them.
Charlotte, it must have been a relief to be able to finally get that diagnosis and then be able to look at treatment, I suppose. We know that medication is available, but you've decided not to go down the medication path?
Yeah, that's right. So at the moment I had a long conversation with my psychiatrist about what I thought was appropriate for me, and we decided that it was actually the situation that was causing so many of the issues for me. And so by now changing the environment I'm in, I find a number of, particularly a lot of it's driven by anxiety, but a lot of the things I was having problems with have now subsided. So I now work, rather than in a busy hospital environment, I now work in private practice where I see one client for an hour, have all of my attention on them and their family, write my note for that in a room by myself, and then see the next person. And for me, that's just completely changed everything. I now feel so much more comfortable. I'm confident in my own environment, and it's completely changed. How happy I am about what I do.
Yeah.
And I made the decision that medication wasn't appropriate for me at this time. It may be in the future, and I'm definitely open to that. And I take medication for my anxiety, so that also kind of does feed into the ADHD as well. But I think if medication is something that's going to help, go for it. If that's going to help you on your path, take all the resources you can in that space.
Yeah.
Well, Charlotte Moore, thank you for being so open and honest
Yeah.
about your journey, and thanks for coming in this morning. And also Professor Adam Guastella, it's great to have you in as well.
Thanks very much. Could I just make one small point?
Yes, of course.
Whenever the media talk about ADHD, they do focus on the rates of medication use.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to make it clear to the audience that, medication can be life-changing for people. And we don't question it for depression, we don't question it for anxiety. And around ADHD, we know that the number of people that have ADHD are not getting adequate treatment. And a lot of that is around stigma. So if I could just emphasise to people that, they should be trying to get the support they need, and it can make a huge difference for people.
Yeah.
Very important point.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Good to
Thank
see you
you.
both.
Thanks.